Good have Shabbos, everyone. Parshas Chukas, Parsha between Gimel Tammuz and Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, the beginning of the liberation of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and we spoke last week also the Yarset of the Rebbe, where there's the hidden beginning of redemption to be revealed in its fullest when it comes to Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. May it be Taka this year. We should see the full Geula with the Geula Mitzvah Shlema already when we go into Yud Beis Tammuz this coming week. Parshas Chukas is a very interesting parsha, has a lot going on. Aside from the fact that we lose two of our great giants, Miriam and Aaron HaKohen, they also have the news that Moshe Rabbeinu will not be going into the land, and that applied to Aaron as well. And we also find out we learned the law of the red heifer, of the Parah Adumah. Also the final victories, wars of the Jewish people on the east side of the Jordan River. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of verses that explain the greatness of Moshe, the Jewish people. But to put something into context, an idea, the Parah Adumah is, we learned about this many times, represents the great idea of Ratzav V'Shoiv. And we know that it's a very complicated halacha. It defines the level of mitzvah called a chayk, which means a mitzvah that this is the way God decided it and we don't understand. The only one person that God elevated to the level of revelation of the mitzvah was Moshe Rabbeinu. But even King Solomon, who knew everything, didn't understand this mitzvah properly. And what is the mitzvah for? The idea of Parah Adumah is, how do we purify a person who's come into contact with something what's called tumas meis. Tumas meis is a person who dies gives off impurities. And if a person who's alive comes into contact with the impurity of death, that impurity gets transferred to the live person. So now we have a live person that's impure with the impurity of death. And that was very complicated to Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, a person's alive with the impurities of death. That's a horrible combination. So Moshe said, how does one purify themselves from something like this? And what is the Parah Adumah? So what we don't understand is the process, but there are some things that the Alter Rebbe explains very much in the Kutei Torah, that the two main ideas of the Parah Adumah is that we burn the Parah Adumah with all its parts, with all the trees and the woods that gets put together, and that gets turned into ash. And then the ash, then we have to draw water from what's called Be'er Mayim Chaim, from a live stream. And if we combine the ash with the water and we sprinkle it on the person becomes pure from the impurity of contact with death. So the two main products we have over here is the water, the Mayim Chaim, and the ash. And they both represent this idea of Ratzav V'Shoiv, this idea of yearning towards Hashem, and the whole purpose really of our creation. We find another time in this week's parsha about water, about the Be'er, the well, especially the well of Miriam. But at the end of the parsha, we find a miracle that's very unique. There's a miracle that happens that's not really told about, that as the Jews are about to enter into a certain part of the desert to get ready to go into the land, they're faced with an extreme danger with the people of Amori that hid into the mountains. And before the Jewish people came in and they were going to ambush them, the mountains closed and reopened, killed everyone inside. And the Jewish people seemingly wouldn't know anything about it. What revealed them? The miracle was the well. The well that traveled through gathered all the blood and the parts of this so to say gory situation and showed them that it was a great miracle. And then it says, Oz Yasher Yisrael, the Jewish people sang, the Rebbe says, a level of song that was even beyond the song of the Shira, of the splitting of the Red Sea. It says, everyone together, Yisrael, doesn't mention Moshe, doesn't mention God, like Rashi points out, but nevertheless, it's a great miracle with a great Shira, because of what happens from the well. So again, we see the well, Mayim Chaim. What's the idea here? The idea is like this, an amazing thing that Alter Rebbe says. When a person comes into this world, in the Maimarim of the well and the Shira of the well, we say there's a difference between a spring and a well. A spring is water that is on its own, pushes outwards and goes out. A well is also water that's under the ground, that makes its way to a pools under the ground, but you have to dig to find that water. The water is not going to come up on its own. You have to pump it out. Even once you reveal it, it doesn't push itself out. It's not at all like a spring, although it's also considered Mayim Chaim. It's fresh water. That's considered the highest level of mikvah, of pure water. But the idea is that the difference between a well and a spring is that the well, in order to get to that location, has to dig itself and push itself through the earth. And that represents the avod of a person, that we go out to the world, and we push ourselves, and by pushing ourselves through all the complications, through the rocks, through the dirt, we become a Be'er Mayim Chaim, a well of live water. It's the process of pushing through to get to that pool of water under the ground that later gets revealed through digging of the person. that creates it makes it into a well of live water. Eish, the fire that burns the paraduma, loses its form. The form of everything is made up of the four elements: Eish, Mayim, Ruach, Afer: water, fire, wind, and earth. When you put it together in different forms, it creates things. It gives a form to something. The tree, the animal, is the form of the combination, each combination of the four elements. When you burn it, you get rid of the three elements: the water, the wind, and the fire. And what's left is just the ash. That represents humility, humbleness. There's certain parts of ourselves that in order to move forward, in order to purify ourselves from the contact with death, from being a live person that's in contact with death, is some part of ourselves has to lose its form to become a total ash. And that ash, it has to be reconstructed to be something holy and something pure. But in order to go through that process, you have to first lose your full form. Unlike the water doesn't lose its form. The water stays the same water as far as the context of the water. It's the same water. It's water. It's the same amount of water. But the water itself, as is, becomes pure, becomes a be'er mayim chaim, a water of life, because it pushes through. And the lesson that we have over here from the paraduma in this week's parsha, the shira of the water, is that we have to combine the two in our avodah. There's a part of ourselves that has to go through the humility, the humbling, the deconstruction, to reconstruct ourselves, to reform ourselves. But then there's the part of ourselves that we have to remain with. And that part has to go through the context, the idea of the water, the pushing through. And when we combine the two, it means we combine what we are, who we are, the water as is, just been refined and purified. And on top of that, the ash, the parts of ourselves that needs to be reconstructed. Both of them have to have changed, but in different ways. And we recombine them. Then we can become a pure entity in a life of purity. When we have a good Shabbos and a good Yom Tov, Yud B'Stamas, Geula Mitzvah Shema with Mashiach Tzidkenu. Good Shabbos.